Welcome to Concerned Citizens Presents. Concerned Citizens of Laguna Woods is an organization dedicated to peace, economic and social justice, good government, and a clean environment. Every month, we invite an expert to enlighten us on a topic related to our mission. Because Village TV videotapes these presentations, we can share that expertise with a larger audience. We hope you enjoy today's broadcast.
In Southern California's nonprofit sector for over 20 years. The organizations that have benefited from his skills include the YMCA, Playworks of Southern California, One OC, and since 2020, South County Outreach. In addition to his paid post, Mr. Brewer volunteers for several public service organizations, including the Public Law Center, the Institute for Community Impact, and most recently, the Mission VAO Planning and Transportation Committee. Now please join me in welcoming LaVal Brewer.
I wasn't supposed to be here today. Really, I wasn't. I was supposed to be here in a couple weeks. But there was an opportunity for me to come earlier, and I'm going to tell you why I'm starting with that, because it kind of leans into what's going to happen in the world when I get back. So I have been doing nonprofit work since before I got out of high school, which was in 1984, 40 years ago. Nonprofit, kind of like giving back work, it's the thing that always filled my bucket. And when you're young, you don't know that those are the things that fill your bucket until someone tells you. You go to a workshop and all of a sudden you realize, oh, this is what fills my bucket. This is what makes me happy. This is what gives me purpose. But I started working at the YMCA back in April the 5th, 1985. That was the first day I worked at the YMCA. But it wasn't the first time I'd worked in nonprofit work. In other words, government nonprofit work. I had been doing day camps with kids, taking kids on little trips on the bus. And I remember one of my first day campers, this kindergartner, Yossi, and we were at the Pantages Theater, the Cimarron Dome, you know that big dome in Hollywood? And we were sitting there and we were watching E.T. And it was the first time I realized just how important it is to sit with a kindergartner. Because all of a sudden I just felt him going, I didn't understand what was going on because I didn't have siblings. So I didn't know what this meant. And I was like, are you crying? What's happening here? And my leader said, yeah, you know, he feels comfortable with you, but E.T. is really, really making him happy. He was just so happy that E.T. got to come home. So I realized right then and there that I'm like, oh, this helping kids and being around kids and being around people is joyous. It's fun. It's something I really wanted to do. And from that point, I started recognizing, like, I need to eventually do some real work. I actually need to get a job. And my grandfather, who was born in Texas, had some land in Brazoria, Texas. And he was telling, we would go on these trips together, and he would tell me about this land in Brazoria, Texas, right next to a lake, and it was beautiful and open. And one day I was like, I'm going to start a camp at Brazoria on your land. And I told him, and he never said anything negative to me. And he was like, that's a great idea. My name is LaVal. He called me Derek. My middle name is Derek. That's a great idea, Derek. I love it. And he let me think that the whole time. And then finally I got old enough to go to this land in Texas. And it's nice land, but it wasn't a camp. It was never going to be a camp. There was no one anywhere close. There was nothing on the land. Lots of good water, fishing, oil running underneath, but there was no camp. And I remember going, well, what am I going to do now? I was going to start my own camp. I was going to run my own camp. And at that same time, I started working at the YMCA, and for those of you who know YMCAs, you can't go to a state without YMCA without finding a camp. They're everywhere. They're in the mountains, they're in the ocean, they're in the desert, they're on Catalina, they're everywhere. And the joy of taking kids to camp and I'm getting somewhere. The joy of taking kids to camp and seeing them find wonder for the first time, and also find independence sometimes for the first time. Sometimes the terror of leaving their family, and then it's about Wednesday. You know, you start on Saturday. It's about Wednesday when they finally realize, like, I'm gonna be okay. But that joy of building a community, that joy of building a community. Because what happens when you take kids to sleepaway camp is you meet them maybe a week before, if you're lucky. Some kids you meet the day of, the day you get on the bus. And depending upon the age group, that can be really successful or it can be really bad. Right? Didn't make a difference because you're going to work through the whole thing. But here's what happens. These kids come together, and some of them know each other, and a good number of them don't know each other. And some want to be in the same group, but they can't be in the same group. They have to be in a different group. They have to be in this cabin where I had my 8 boys and my CIT, my high school kid. And what happens is you get on the bus, and you start to get to know each other. Right? You start to learn your names, and you create a group identifier. In other words, you may call your group the Happy Seals, or whatever it may be. And then you give them something that has them visually see themselves as being in the same group. Now, these are kids who don't necessarily go to school together. They don't necessarily have all these things that are bringing them together as a group. But they start to form as a small community. Right? They start to form as a small community. You start to talk to each other. You start to get to know each other. And then that group becomes a small community, and you kind of work through the week. You eat meals together. Sometimes you teach kids how to eat meals together. You teach kids how to have their own hygiene. Sometimes you really work hard at that. Remember this one little boy who's now a man who has children. He would not change his clothes the whole week. Only what he would do, he would appease me. He would appease me. He would turn his shirt inside out. He turned it around. I made him change his underwear on the 3rd day. But you greet this community, and then from my community, so my camp, my group, and then there are other boys, same group, and there are some other older kids, and there were girls. This whole thing starts to become a bigger community, right? We all start to live together in this dirt environment, having fun and learning about life. But what I didn't know then was that was the education of a lifetime. As a leader of a camp, bringing people together to create small communities. In other words, not the huge city of people, but the small community. 200 kids experiencing camp for the first time. And me and my friends and the directors understanding what it meant and what it means to bring people together in a common good for a small community. I hold on to that to this day. I hold on to that small community thought to this day. It is one of the things that anchors the work we do at South County Outreach, in that when we talk about our work and what we do, we talk about it in the community, but we don't talk about it in the larger community. We talk about it in the neighborhood. Because what we do is we help families and individuals who are struggling with finances and poverty, or a short-term setback that is unforeseeable and difficult to manage. We help them navigate through that. And while we can't help everyone on a consistent basis, we do that. And the way that we explain that to people when we talk to them is we say to them, we're talking about your community. And when you think about your community, what do you think about? You don't think about the street down, the street across the way. You don't think about the school that is a mile away. You think about the school that is right next to you. You think about the park that is right next to you. You think about your neighbor. When I say community, we typically think about our neighbor. The next expanded part of that is when we think of community, we think about the groups of people that we come in contact with. Our book club, our religious community, our high school friends, the friends that go and have coffee in the morning, the group that you invite over for dinner, that neighborhood, that community. Well, here's the thing that we all know about, and I know all of you have experienced this, that at some point in time in your lives, you've had a friend, a neighbor, someone in your community who is going through some type of financial struggle. And if you haven't, God bless you. But the reality is that we are not talking about, because when we say community, when we say we help people, sometimes we think of the other, right? We think of the person who we don't know, the person who we've never met, the person who we're not quite sure about, right? Because we're human. That's what humans do, except for the exceptional ones. And there are exceptional ones. But we think about this bigger thing when we hear community. And we want you to think, and I want you to talk, when I'm talking today, I want you to think about the person sitting next to you. I want you to think about your next door neighbor. I want you to think about your friend who has a friend who is not doing so great right this minute, who is in your community. But the reality is, when we do our best work, is when we do it for the people who are our neighbors. The people who come to South County Outreach on a regular basis to help with food insecurity, or because they don't know how they're going to pay their rent the next day, or their utilities are going to get turned off because they don't have enough money to pay for those things. Those are our neighbors. They're people who live in our community. In South County, and in South County Outreach, almost 98% of the people who come to get support from us, whether that be get food or to help with rental assistance, 98% are housed. Housed. They have the roof over their head. 98% of the people, your neighbors, our neighbors, who come to get help and support, have a roof over their head. We're not talking about homeless people, although we have homeless people, and we help them just as much as everyone else, and we give a lot of energy to them. But the reality is, when we think about South County, when we think about this neighborhood that is, on TV every once in a while, we think affluence and everyone's fine and it's all good. It's great to live here. Everyone's good. No one is struggling. And the reality is that on a regular daily basis, our neighbors are struggling. And in some cases, we're seeing an increase in that struggle from populations that live in this neighborhood, that live in neighborhoods like this, who are older adults. We see people who never thought they would be in a line with food, never, ever considered that one day they would have to walk up to our door and say, I hear that I can get free food here. And when you think about that look, and think we're talking about neighbors, and oftentimes when we think of community and people who are coming to get these kinds of services, we think of the other, right? So I can't imagine some of you, when you heard I was going to talk about, you want to hear about what's happening in Los Angeles. What's going on in San Francisco? What's happening there? All these homeless people we see on the street. But we don't see as much of that here. We see some. It's a small amount. The ones that we don't see, these are the homeless people, homeless families, individuals, are typically families living in their cars who have employment, who have a job, who go to work every day, and who in the morning they get up, they pull their children out of the car, they stand them in front of them, and they comb their hair and they put a fresh set of clothes on them if they can, and they drive them to school where they're hoping that they get an amazing education so that they never have to be homeless like they are now. Our neighbors who want to go to these amazing schools in our neighborhood, who want to live in a neighborhood that we all want to live in and strive to, and in some cases choose intentionally. Our neighbors who are struggling. Now some of you may ask this question later on, so I'm going to answer it. Why? Right? Why? Why in such an affluent location where people are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and live in amazing locations and homes and drive beautiful cars, why do they end up needing food assistance or rental assistance. And I can tell you right this minute, there's a lot of answers. I can tell you there's not 2 answers. And the 2 answers I often have people say to me, and if you say this, it's all right. Don't worry about it. You didn't know I was going to say this to you. But it's not mental illness.
What?
Mental illness.
It's not mental.
It is not mental illness. And it is not drugs. Now let me tell you why I can say that safely. I can also say that in some cases, it is mental illness. And in some cases, it is drug use. But it is not the systemic issue. And how do I know that? Because I have a really good friend who I love who has mental illness, and he is stably housed. He's doing just fine in his home. He's doing great. And I also have a friend who has a tendency to smoke marijuana on a daily basis. And he is making more money than all of you. And he is stably housed. Stably housed. He has a house, he's doing just fine. Now, you may go, yeah, but it is that too. In some cases it is. Well, let me tell you where it shows up more often. It shows up more often when a woman is standing here and her spouse is standing next to her. Let's say it's a man. And for some reason, that man, who is a breadwinner, decides that it is time for him to leave. And he doesn't care. And he's gone. Leaves the house, leaves the kids, leaves the car payment, leaves all the other things, and takes the money with them. And yes, law enforcement could probably find him, and we could probably take him to get all the services, but for how long is that woman going to be by herself without any money? And how long is that mortgage going to be okay with it not being paid? And how long can she put gas in the tank when the checking account is gone? How long, how long, how long? Suddenly, this woman who was doing just fine is in crisis. Absolute crisis. We all know someone who suddenly who's a business owner, has a great business, doing wonderful work in the community and in their lives, and suddenly they have a catastrophic illness. And there is no money coming in any longer. And it may be a short period of time, but it might be an eternity. It might be the entire time. That's a gigantic change. And you all know how quickly it is to burn through your savings when there's no additional money coming through. But no one expects that. And some people, of course, get insurance, and they have all these other things to save themselves, but there's a significant number of people who cannot afford that additional luxury of a backstop. Those are just 2 simple examples of how someone can fall into poverty. Now let me give you 2 more examples of where someone can fall into a crisis. Living paycheck to paycheck. I know you've all heard that before, right? The living paycheck to paycheck thing. Why don't you get some savings? Well, if you don't have enough money to put in savings, or if no one has taught you how to save, which, by the way, 50% of Americans have a very poor savings account, so it's not a small number of people, it's a large number of people. And we're talking about people who have wealth. You have a car payment that goes bad, or your car breaks down, and you don't have enough money to fix it. And the way that you get paid is by showing up to work. And you don't have a work-from-home job. Well, that can be a problem, because your employer says, you haven't been showing up to work anymore, and we're no longer going to provide you with that resource. That could be a 3-month period. I'm going to tell you a story about a gentleman who came into our pantry just a couple of weeks ago, and it became real to me. I'd seen that, I understood that, I'd felt it, but I'd never seen it like this. So I was in our pantry. It's right down the street here next to Bake and Rockville. And for some reason, I'm in the parking lot, which I'm in the parking lot often, but for some reason I was standing in the parking lot with nothing to do. I like to have things to do. And this red, really fast, we have a small parking lot, Tesla goes whipping past me. And I was like, whoa, slow down, man. I was like this, right? So I'm like, whoa, what's happening? And the parking lot was full. We probably had 20 people in line. We already had 10 people in the pantry, 20 people in the pantry getting food. And this Tesla goes whipping by me. I was like, okay, that's not so great. And all of a sudden I'm thinking to myself, there's no parking down there. So he's got to come back. So he's backing up his Tesla. And as he's backing up his Tesla, a little bit too fast again, I did ignore him, I hear this crash. I was like, oh no. So I turn, see which car he had hit, and he had run into our truck. Now, don't feel too bad about our truck. Our truck is a Ford F-250 stake bed with a steel lift gate that lifts down. I don't think he scratched the paint. But his Tesla was in a world of hurt. It was in bad shape. And I looked at it, I was like, oh, that's gonna hurt. That's not gonna go well. He gets out and he starts berating me. He's like, why did you leave your truck parked here? And I backed into Tesla. I'm thinking, you have a Tesla with sensors on it. How did you hit it? I don't understand. But I didn't say that because I'm the CEO, I'm not allowed to do that. You gotta take that part out. No. So this gentleman is talking, and he's like, I need to tell the police you shouldn't have left your truck there. I'm like, sir, you backed into a parked vehicle. I don't know what to tell you. Sure, I'll give you our insurance. If you want to do that, we can figure it out. And he called the police, and the police showed up. And it's okay. He called the police, and the police showed up. And as I walked back out, the officer was standing there, and he goes, you backed into a parked car. And he goes, yes. He goes, I can't help you. And I looked at him, I go, I told you. I can't help you. But this is where the story turns. Okay? This is where the story turns. The officer leaves, is about to leave, and this gentleman looks at me, and I look at him and I go, can I help? What? He goes, I lost my job 3 months ago. I've been trying to find work. I don't know what to do. I've never been in this situation before. My family is hungry, and I can't do anything to help them. I can't do anything to help. And he was this close to tears. He was this close to breaking down. Someone who had everything he thought he needed, and everything was going great. And he lost his job, and 3 months later, he had no clue what to do. Now remember I talked about neighbors and South County outreach a couple minutes ago? Well, when you think about where we live and the truth about South County, in that there's affluence and middle-class neighborhoods and there's revenue, that also means that there's a lack of awareness and a lack of experience with poverty. Right? A lack of awareness and a lack of experience with poverty. And when the world is crashing down on you, and the stress of the world is coming down on you, and you've never experienced or navigated the welfare system or the CalFresh system, or asking someone to help you financially other than your family, that is a whole new world to navigate. That's a whole new world to navigate. So sometimes people just go, I don't know what to do. They don't do anything. Sometimes they turn to their friends and their neighbors, or they turn to their pastors, their churches, and they say, I don't know what to do. And that is when the magic of the reason why I do these speeches comes alive. Because I don't do these conversations so that you will give me money. It's a nice benefit. That's not the reason why we do it. I will go anywhere, anytime, any day to share this one message. And I will talk about some other things, but to share this one message. That your neighbors need you to know that if they need help, that you need to tell them there is help for them. And if you ever need help, and your family needs help, that the vulnerability that you must have is to open your mouth, to talk to the people who love you the most, who are your neighbors, and say, I need help, so that you could be directed away from that pain. Why should you be directed away from that pain? Because we're a community. And because we have neighbors. And because we chose to live where we live because of that community and because of those neighbors. So if we chose this community intentionally because of the glorious nature of what it is, then our vulnerability to be there for our neighbors and our vulnerability to be honest with our neighbors when we are struggling is what makes community. It is what makes community. But if people don't know, especially in South County, that they need to speak up, then our community and our neighbors and ourselves, we struggle and suffer in silence. And we are not meant to do that. We're just not. So, 30 years ago, Ray Havard, 35 years ago, Ray Havard, the founder of our organization, was seeing that this is what he needed to do. He was seeing that in his neighborhood of Lake Forest, that families and individuals were struggling with food insecurity. And at that time, there was a new emphasis around food banks and food pantries that was starting to get much more attention. And he decided that's what he was going to do. So 35 years ago, a neighbor who watched his neighbor struggle opened up his garage and invited his friends to give him food so he could give it away to others. And today, we see roughly 7,000 individuals every year who we help with food insecurity by making sure they have food on their table, who may be struggling with their rent, that we pay the rent for them so that they can stay in their houses and not become homeless, or the utility payment. In a very small instance, we currently help families who are in affordable housing units. We have 16 condos in Lake Forest, Mission Viejo, and Laguna Niguel. All 16 of those condos are affordable housing units where we bring people from shelter. So they're in a shelter. We put them in our unit. We get them stable by working with them, Families Forward, Families Assistance Ministries, Mercy House, Eastside Church, the County of Orange, cities all over the place to ensure that they have what they need so they can be stable and live in the community that they want to live in a way that is vibrant for them. And then they move into a new space. It's quite a blessing. All because one man believed that his neighbors should not go to bed hungry or without a place to call. So, now I need to tell you all the rest of the stuff. My name is LaVal Brewer. I know you heard that already. And you heard my bio, not important. What is important is today is my daughter's 27th birthday. She's been on TV with me, so it's all good. I have 3 girls. I'm a dad of girls, so every time I come home, someone loves me. It's really glorious. 3 girls. I live my life to ensure that they have joy in their lives and that they are purposeful for others. And they have done a wonderful job with that. My wife Kelly works at a middle school here in Lake Forest, and I call her the junior high whisperer. And that's because she is so good at talking to junior high kids, they love her. They respect her, she respects them. It's a wonderful thing. She's a junior high whisperer. I grew up in South Los Angeles. For those of you who don't know where South Los Angeles, that is right next to Watts. I grew up outside of Watts. And the house that my children live in, my two oldest children live in, is the house that my grandparents bought before I was born. A beautiful Spanish-style home down in Los Angeles with the most delicious lemon tree you will ever have. Squeeze a little bit of lemon, no sugar, water, lemonade. So I've been in Los Angeles and Orange County and Los Angeles all my life, and I love this neighborhood. And You heard my work with the YMCA, which helped me understand community. It helped me understand how to give back community and grow and build those groups. It also taught me how to raise money for the cause that was important to me, how to navigate people and help them be successful, and how to deal with conflict, which you live with a lot of conflict when you become the CEO. But it's a wonderful job.
Could you talk up a little bit?
I can try, but I can't say that the mic is going to give me much more than that, but I will do my best. I can also talk louder, but I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Swallow the end of your sentences.
Swallow the end of my sentences.
Don't do that anymore.
I'm trying to make time. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit more about South County Outreach for those of you who do not know about it, because I know some of you are wanting to know that. South County Outreach has what's called a theory of change. And this theory of change is how do we go about living into the world? So we have 2 documents that kind of anchor what we do. The theory of change and our 5 bold steps. I'm going to start off with the theory of change. The theory of change means when we think about what happens because of the work that we do, what makes that come alive, right? What makes it actually work? And we have 3 things that are important to us that we believe help us be successful. The first is we are about community, right? So we live and work within the places that we are, and we have this community piece. The second is we believe that anyone who comes to us from our door needs our help and support. So we have a trust-based belief system with our organization. So if you walk up, we believe that you need help. Now I'll give you an example as to why that works in our food pantry really well and why we're a little more cautious on our rental assistance. So in that trust-based work, the only way that it works well is if you have a human being who is welcoming someone into the relationship. People can't do it by themselves. So our case managers, our staff, our volunteers are the solution. It's not the food. It's not the food, it's not the rental assistance, it's the people. It's the human beings who sit down with someone or welcome someone in or gives them instructions on how to do the work that makes the transformation happen. So when you think about nonprofit work and you hear this, well, we want every single penny to go to program, and then you kind of go, well, I don't want to pay for all these people. Who are the people who are going to make this happen? Right? So when you think about this work, people-centered is the critical aspect of that. That people on our end, and then on the other side, one of our theories is on the other side. So we believe in helping others who help themselves. So in other words, we're going to put as much energy into helping you as you are going to put into helping yourself. Right? Why do we say that and why do we do that? Because we don't want to burn ourselves out. Because if nonprofit people burn themselves out, there's not enough people behind us who want to get paid that little money in order to do this work. Right? So we have a theory that we bring people together, and those who are getting benefit have to be in the game with us in some way, shape, or form. And that we have to give as much energy for them. And then the final theory, the final part of that is we really want to see some type of transformational change. That means that you don't have to come back to us. We haven't solved for that yet. It's a desire, but we haven't solved for that yet. And the reason for that is poverty isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and it continues to be very difficult. And inflation and some of the other problems that we have in our society right this minute make it more and more difficult. Make it more and more difficult. One of our principles, a couple of our principles are that we don't carry our own water. So what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, in order for us to be successful as a nonprofit, we believe that partnership with other organizations is critically important to that work. Now, you're going to recognize this because how many remember the number of nonprofits I mentioned when I started talking earlier? I started talking about other nonprofit organizations. That's unheard of by a nonprofit exec. Right? Nonprofit execs don't get up and say, okay, if it wasn't for Second Harvest Food Bank, if it wasn't for Families Assistance Ministries down the street, if it wasn't for Families Forward over here, if it wasn't for Mercy House over here, we wouldn't be able to collectively do the work we need to do as a community. We say that all the time because we believe it. Because what we do well, we do really well. What we don't do well, we have someone else do. We give it away in a heartbeat. So, an example is Public Law Center, who helps people who need support and legal assistance. They are in our office every once in a while. We invite the county into our office. We invite the Be Well OC, who is a new organization helping with mental health. We invite them into this space. We believe that in order to help our entire community, it takes our entire community. And we open our doors at any moment in time to let someone else help someone else and be successful. That's one of our critical partnerships. The second is we believe in long-term relationships, but we don't believe in long-term support. Now, we have been providing long-term support for a long time, and we don't have a way of fixing that. But we don't believe that that's what should happen. So here's an example. Who thinks that someone is like, I can't wait to go to the food pantry today and get me some food, even though I'm not quite sure if there's food there. Although we always have food because of the generosity of our donors. We always have food. And because of Second Harvest, we always have food. But think about it. Who says, you know what? I don't want to pay for my groceries anymore, so I'm going to take the chance on going to a food pantry, and I bet you my list that I have right here, there's going to be some green beans, some soup, some macaroni and cheese. Guaranteed, there will be green beans, soup, and macaroni and cheese, because for some reason, everyone donates green beans, soup, and macaroni and cheese. Peanut butter, too. Lots of peanut butter. No jelly. No jelly. Idiots. Gotta have jelly with peanut butter. So when you think about that, like, that's how we roll. That's how we lean into this space. But we know that transactional relationships, which are people coming to get food on a regular basis, is not the solution. We believe that no one wants to come to a food pantry on a regular basis. And by the way, it's not something we should wish on anyone. We shouldn't wish on anyone that the only way for them to feed themselves is that they have to go get free food from a food pantry, when we are the largest producer of food in the world. And this region of the country is one of the largest producers of a variety of food in the world. And at the end of every harvest, there are farmers who plow under food because they had no way of getting that food to the people who need it. It's appalling. It's absolutely appalling that I have to ask for money in order to feed my neighbors when we have more food available to us to feed other people in the world. And that's not a political statement. That is just a basic statement. It's a basic statement. Because the food that's left in the harvest at the end isn't the best food, but it is good food. It's plowed under. So, we do all this work. It's a beautiful pantry. If you were to come over to the pantry, I invite anyone to come over and visit. It's open 9 to 2, Monday through Thursday. We're closed half the other Friday so the staff can prepare and get work, because we now have 2 pantries. So we need to prepare for those 2 pantries. And so my staff can rest, have a good weekend, and come back to work Monday, fired up and ready to go. That food pantry looks like a scaled down Trader Joe's. It is absolutely beautiful. And it is beautiful for a very specific reason, because we want people to be vulnerable. And how do I know that it's working? When I first started working at South County Outreach almost 4 years ago, I would see a couple of men show up to the food pantry. Today, I see a lot of men showing up to the food pantry. Why is that important? One, because it's good for men to learn how to shop. But the second is, they feel comfortable coming in it because it feels like a regular grocery store. So they don't feel like they're less than, they don't feel like it's different. And that's valuable because as that vulnerability breaks down, we then can begin talking to them about how do we get here and what can we do to help you get out of the situation you're in right now and move them forward. We learned this during COVID, that when we treat people like human beings, when we treat people like our neighbors, that they actually will act like our neighbors. We made a shift during COVID in our food pantry, and that shift was, before COVID, we would have a nice volunteer walk with the person going through the food pantry, and they actually had a basket. It's a really beautiful basket. We still do have that. And then they would say, okay, you can have 2 of those, you can have 1 of these, based upon family size. And during COVID and after COVID, when we were talking about reopening and letting people fully back into the pantry, the first question the volunteer says, okay, so when are we going to get the people we're going to walk with? The shoppers. And I go, never. And they're like, well, that's what we do. I go, not anymore, we don't. They're like, they're just going to take everything. It's going to be really hard. And I said, well, let's see what happens. Let's just give it a couple of weeks. Let's see what happens. Let's treat adults like adults. Doggone it. Those adults took less food. Took less food. Because they weren't instructed to take 2 of these and 1 of those and 3 of those. They got to shop like they were shopping at the regular grocery store, and they took what they needed. Were there some people who took more than they needed? Yes. Yes. Especially when we introduced into the pantry non-traditional pantry items. Those non-traditional pantry items are oils, seasonings, flour, sugar, shampoo, deodorant. We saw some people going, oh, this isn't your regular food pantry. And they were tempted to take more because they were at scarcity. But then we treated them like adults again, and we did a checkout system just like you do at your regular grocery store. So in other words, when you put stuff in the basket in the grocery store, you go to the grocery line, what do you have to do? Except for Costco. You have to take all the stuff back out of the basket. Well, when we implemented that system, we found that people were not taking more than they needed to take because there was an accountability system in place that they were used to and familiar with. We treated people like adults. And when we treated people like adults, all the problems we had before, which were, I really need 3 or 4 of these, or I need some, went away. Went away. It became calm and fun and relaxing. Now let me switch and talk about affordable housing and rental assistance. I know some of you are very familiar with the case of affordable housing in Orange County and in California. And there's some contentious conversations around affordable housing in South County. Some of that contentiousness is because the state of California is saying to cities, based upon your housing, your size of your city, based upon the needs, you need to have X number of apartments, condos, whatever you call them, rentals, that are considered affordable. What's affordable? Affordable is, this is what I teach my children, you cannot live in a place that is more than 30% of your income. Because that's a bad practice. And my middle daughter, who was living in a place that was more affordable than her income, and I had a conversation one day. I said, you need to move in with your sister. And she goes, I don't really want to do that, not because she didn't love her sister. She just liked where she was living, and she wanted to live independently. And I said, remember that 30% thing? She's like, okay, fine. She moved in with her sister. 3 months later, she lost her job. Been unemployed for almost a year. She actually started working again on Monday. Wow. Yeah. But because we had these conversations about income and what we need to do, and I'm getting back to the RENA numbers, she had some savings because we talked about the principles. Well, affordable housing. What does it mean? It means that if we were to build a, how many people are golfers that play at the golf at this location? Okay, I'm sorry. If you were to build a building on the golf course here, right, you could probably build 200 doors easily, 200 apartments. Of those 200 apartments in California, an affordable housing allotment is around 15%. So of 100 apartment units, that means 15 would be affordable. 300, we'd have 45. Right? So 45 of the 300 units would be considered affordable for someone who is low income, which means that that unit, which does not have to be the same as the unit next door to it, it could be a different unit, it could be somewhat smaller, it could have less amenities to it, but it needs to be habitable. That means that 45 of those units would cost a little less. In some cases, a lot less. Now, here's the thing about that. When you ask the administrators at UCI, the hospital, Mission Hospital, Saddleback, and Kaiser, and Chalk, what one of their biggest problems is today, it is affordability for their nurses and their hospital staff to live close to the hospital. One of their largest problems is affordability for their nurses and their hospital staff to live close to the hospital. Now let's think about that as a community health issue. So if your nurse, or my nurse, who's my youngest, has to live, let's say in Riverside, but comes all the way out to Saddleback because she cares for this community and that's her job, after working a 12-hour shift for 3 days. What do you think that's like for this caregiver who is responsible for lives and their ability to live where they work, if she wanted to live here? Well, there's not enough affordable housing units, and that's not even a possibility. Now, that's someone who has some employment. When you think about those who have less employment, in other words, they make less money, less income, should they have to live out there too? Is that the punishment for not having enough money? That you have to live out there in order to serve here, where we live? So we have to be thinking about affordable housing differently than just, oh, you know, those people who can't afford to live here. It is those people who live here, who want to live here, who are a vibrant part of our community, who are a critical nature to our community. That's what's important. So when you think about affordable housing, it is really about making sure that affordability is embedded in your community. And will we be able to have enough affordable housing? I have no idea. I have no clue. But opposing it is not a great idea. Opposing having a place for someone to live who lives close is an important thing to do. So we believe in that, and we advocate for that. I think I'm at time, right? 5 more minutes? Okay. All right. So that's affordable housing, rental assistance, and rental happening. So in other words, what happens when we do rental assistance, it is someone is behind their rent. And we're like a small IRS agent when it comes to that. So when someone's behind their rent and they come, they say, hey, can you help me pay for my rent? And I get funds from the city of Lake Forest. I just turned off. The city of Lake Forest or from Mission Viejo. We steward those families to help pay for their rent so that they can stay in their houses. And that money comes from the federal government called. But when we give it out, we are very, very careful. We look at bank statements. Oh, back on. We look at bank statements. We look at savings account. We ask about their employment. We want to make sure they have the ability to pay the rent the next month. All those are things we look at so that that family can stay in their house. Because if they fall out of housing, then they become homeless on our streets. And that is much more expensive. It is much more expensive once people fall into homelessness. So our role and responsibility and hope, there's a bug following me around, is to keep people from falling into homelessness. That's what we're trying to do, is to prevent that homelessness. So we annually help about 100 to 150 households, somewhere around $300,000 worth of rental assistance. Almost all of that is government-funded money. Almost all of that is government-funded money, with the exception of the money that we spend for our case managers, those humans, who shepherd them through, ask them questions, help them start to develop a budget, get them into our financial literacy class so they can understand their finances and make their finances work longer for them. All right, so I'm going to close with I am very thankful that you invited me to speak today. I hope you could learn something about what we do. I hope you understand the character of our organization and what we're trying to accomplish. I hope that you will be an advocate not for South County Outreach, but for your neighbors who are struggling and need help. And that if you do need to send someone our direction, that you send them with happiness and joy, because we will welcome them with open arms to try to help them be as successful as possible. And the last thing within that is we have a bus that comes from Laguna Woods, I think it's the second Tuesday of the month, that is provided by the foundation, the Laguna Woods Foundation. They pay for the Age Well bus to bring family individuals who need that support over to the pantry after hours, so they can shop as long as they want without the busyness of the franticness of the day. And I love it when they show up. So one time I do go to the parking lot every day and I go and meet them all and say, I'm so happy you're here. But you are providing that support, the foundation is providing that support, and there is a need, and you all know this, there's need in this community, and I pray that we can always supply that need for everyone. I'll take any questions.
I'm a member of the board of the foundation of Laguna Woods Village, not to be confused with GRF. And we help support the South County Outreach, very proud to do that. I'd like to reinforce some of the things you said. For the board, I looked at census data for Laguna Woods, and the 2020 census showed that the poverty rate in Laguna Woods is the same as it is in the rest of the United States. It's 11%. The median income in the village is $46,000, which means half the residents, half the households in the village are making less than $46,000 a year. So the need is great. So bless you for what you do.
Thank you. I know some of you probably want the numbers. In Orange County, 44% of Orange County seniors live below the Elderly Economic Security Index. I don't know what that is. My staff wrote that for me. They're good about this. 29% of Orange County seniors experience food insecurity, and 18% of Orange County seniors have independent living challenges. So almost 20%. I also, for my list of accolades that you read off for me, I also have two other volunteer roles. The first is I'm on the Orange County Senior Advisory Council, which is an advisory council that looks at senior issues across the county and makes recommendations to the county supervisors on how to address those senior issues, a wide range of senior issues. And the other is I'm on the Continuum of Care Board. The Continuum of Care Board is a board also in the county, a county board, that is looking at homelessness and how do we solve homelessness in Orange County. Yes?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the work that you do. It's great, it is really greatly appreciated. That's for you, not for me.
Well, it's actually for my staff. I don't know.
It's a couple of things I'd like you to comment on. And one of the things I've really struck home with me when you talked about doing things locally. And I just have this, I don't know if you call it a theory or an opinion, but when we look at things, we have a tendency to look at things like way out, far over the horizon. Use climate change just as an example. We want the Paris Climate Accords, but we don't care what SCE does. We don't put pressure on them to get renewable energy sources. I think we do this all over the place. We're saving all the whales, but we're not taking care of what's right here. So I think you agree with that, and I'd like your opinion on that. The other thing I'd like you to comment. Well, just one? Okay.
I'm not quite sure which one I wanted to answer. Okay, we're going to come, if we have time, we'll come back. Okay, so the horizon. If you were to ask me, what do I see on the horizon? What I see on the horizon is a significant amount of challenges. I do not see solutions just yet. I don't see solutions just yet. I'm an optimist. I'm an incredible optimist. And I don't see it yet. I don't see the solution to homelessness because I don't think there's the political or the social will to actually solve it, primarily because of other, right? So that's my personal belief. I believe it's because of other, like I don't know you, I don't know them, or I haven't experienced. And on the food insecurity, if there is a glimmer of hope in that, California in particular is pushing policies that will at least bring awareness to it and that bring a potential solution. The problem is that we're bringing awareness with policy without a plan. So that concerns me, that there's not a real plan for solving food insecurity. There are people who are out there trying to do it, but the reality is there's no good community-based plan to solve it. The best way to solve food insecurity in my mind is to think of food as a right, and that if someone is hungry, they should never go hungry, and we should find systems that allow people to get food. That does not mean, and this is where I think people get off course with this, that does not mean that you get to go and choose the best cut of meat. Okay? It does not mean you get to choose the most expensive cut of meat. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't allow you to choose meat. Right? There's a bell in there that we should be able to have common sense approaches to making sure someone is fed versus feeding them a montage dish. Right? And I don't think anyone is calling for anyone to have a dish at the montage for free, unless the montage wants to give it away for free anyway, which I would take. But so I think there's will that needs to be created, but there also needs to be some understanding between now and there that we have enough food. Like it is like, I know I've said this a couple times, it is appalling to me that we have enough food and there are people who struggle to get food.
This term food insecurity is something I think I first heard during COVID. It seems like a new term. And I was just wondering, and you kind of are talking about it just now, you're kind of giving me a better feel, but I feel like I still don't quite understand, is this just a new way of expressing what we used to call hunger, people who are hungry? Is this
Yes.
just a softer, kinder word for that? Or are we talking about an emotional illness, or people having notions that they might run out of food when in reality they're not out of food? I'm a little confused about the definition of that.
Sure, I can help you with that. Food insecurity is a softer way of saying when someone at some point in time during, let's say, the month, there's not going to be enough food. Right? There's not enough food for them to eat. Another way of thinking about this is there are friends of mine who are enjoying intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting. That is where you skip a meal, right? Well, there are some people who have been skipping meals for their entire lives because they don't have enough money to have 3 meals a day. That's what we mean by food insecurity. That you're at a point to where you can't verify that you're going to have enough food every single day of your life.